起立，面向佛堂，参加三鞠躬、一鞠躬、再鞠躬、三鞠躬，参加各位点传是一鞠躬，开班一鞠躬，请坐下。Please be seated. Carmen, we're ready to get going whenever you are.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. It's summer, and I do appreciate all the opportunities I have to speak with you. And as such, I'm recycling an older presentation from 2009 as I make preparations to make other presentations to you. It's taking a little longer, but I hope you'll enjoy this. I feel it's still kind of timely. So it's Tour de France season. I'm not sure if you are a sports fan and are keeping up on the news, but today was the last, or is the last race, and it looks like there's an Italian that's getting up there in the Tour de France category to be able to win that yellow jacket. I myself am not too huge a fan, but I do appreciate the endurance and the amazing physical strength that it takes to complete such a grueling course. It's almost like a month event, and there's so many cyclists that are together as teams to enable one individual to be able to win that yellow jacket. So I think it's interesting that that's happening today, and bicycling has been on my mind a lot recently. I used to bike a lot in Los Angeles, actually beginning in about 2006. I became a pretty hardcore bicycle commuter. When I lived in Los Angeles, that's basically how I got around town. It was my main means of transportation. I did have a car, but it was expensive to maintain, and gas was a lot, and the worst part about all of it was parking. Of course, I really hated to find parking in my neighborhood. It was nearly impossible. So I often, more than not, would leave my car parked in my office building in Brentwood, and then I would take the bus and use my bicycle throughout the week. What I loved about bicycling in Los Angeles is that there was a very strong culture of bicycling, and in a way it was almost like a renegade taking over the streets type of cycling. And I liked that about it. There was a great sense of community. And since I've moved to Seattle, I've noticed that there's been a lot more emphasis on creating a bicycle culture in Los Angeles, not just for renegade folks like myself and hipsters, but for families and for anyone. So this is a photo of an event that happened this past April. This organization called Ciclavia. And Ciclavia, translation in Spanish, means bike lane. And it was a movement that grew out of Colombia, Bogota, Colombia, as a way to encourage and promote a bike-friendly city because it had become dominated by automobiles. And so a very progressive mayor in Bogota, Colombia, created this system of urban renewal where he blocked off certain city streets and allowed performances and community services to be presented on the sidewalks, and then people could just walk down the street without having to fear being run over by cars. So these hubs, as they called them, were essentially small community areas where you could gather to get your bike fixed or listen to music or shop or have merchandise. They would have food trucks and water, and they became extremely popular, to the point where organizers from that event, or at least they were able to participate and to involve people from Los Angeles. And this event has grown since 2010 to many events. It was just a one-time deal, and now it's happening periodically throughout Los Angeles. So if you're there, I highly encourage you to check it out. This is a photo where they took over Wilshire Boulevard in front of the Page Museum, the La Brea Tar Pits, as some people might know them as. So I think there is a revolution happening, not just in Los Angeles or in Seattle, but in America, especially people getting out of their cars and onto their bikes and getting to know their neighbors a little bit more. Back in 2008, Frank and I went to see the premiere of a really wonderful movie about four guys cycling through China. I'd like to play for you a clip, but it's kind of not worth it because you can only really buy the movie on Amazon to watch it. So I highly encourage you to go to manzumovie.com and check out the trailer. If you feel compelled, you can give them $10 on Amazon and purchase the movie DVD and watch it yourself. So according to the film's website, the filmmakers said they hoped it would provide the audience a more realistic look at China, away from the glitz and glamour of the Olympics, which took place in 2008, and that they thought that it was the right time to explore the country on a more personal level, something that has been lacking in much of the recent coverage, especially leading up to the Olympics. And for these reasons, we feel confident that we will be able to make the film a broad audience experience. It was very enlightening. I mean, here you see a scene of them, all of this wonderful urbanization, and yet they still have to watch out for potholes. And for the most part, bicycles are still continue to be the main transportation medium, especially throughout the world, but especially so in China. I have a friend who worked on production design for the Olympics, and he lived in Beijing for a couple months while that was happening. He definitely appreciated the opportunity to live there, although he was saying that with all the pollution in Beijing, some of you may be aware of that, he had to ride his bicycle and commute to work at night in the morning, so he would leave his house at 2 a.m. and come back about 11 a.m. And that was one way he was able to avoid all the smog. And as China contributes to much of the pollution in their country with all these factories and cars, it's becoming more important. And yet people still aspire to have that higher class automobile lifestyle. So it's definitely a challenge that we all face throughout our societies, is how we move people around, we have provide autonomy. So Manzu, the translation roughly means taking it slow, and that's how they apply the name to the film. And that makes a lot of sense, just taking it slow. And after the movie ended, back 2008, it gave me a lot of thought, and there was a question and answer session with the filmmakers. One of the most interesting facts I found out was that they did not get a permit from the government to film. In fact, their tour guide that they hired was not even fully aware that this was a movie documentary that they were surreptitiously filming until the project was kind of coming close to an end. They just told everyone that they were taking a vacation. Now, the movie avoids politics in general, and I wouldn't see a reason for the Chinese government to ban it, but you never really know. What was also interesting was to learn how surprised people were to see them there, not just because they were Westerners, but that they were riding their bicycles through the rural parts, carrying their belongings with them. This perhaps was the real reason that they were able to be so stealth about making the movie. Any other documentary crew would have had a trailing car to follow them around, perhaps because they had no support other than their guide. This adventure took place 1 month before the Olympics in 2008, and the government had no reason to trouble them. In any case, it was an amazing feat that could only be done by bike. There's a great quote that I like by Ernest Hemingway about biking that captures the spirit of this film. It is by riding a bicycle that you can learn the contours of a country best, since you have to sweat up the hills and coast down them. Thus you remember them as they actually are, while in a motor car only a high hill impresses you, and you have no such accurate remembrance of the country you have driven through as you gain by riding a bicycle. Riding in a car, the 1,000-mile distance from Beijing to Shanghai could have taken maybe a week, but on bicycle it took the guys 28 days. There's a point early in the movie, right after they've left Beijing, where they encounter their first major hill. It is so steep that they have to walk their bicycles up it, and they reluctantly accept that they have brought too much stuff with them and must leave some of it behind in order for them to continue. Even as strong as they were back then, it was still too much junk that they had to take back and leave in the trunk. But ride they did and continue on this journey. You see a little map on the right here, and they were able to bring this amazing journey back to us in a great movie. It's pretty wild. Throughout the week and through this week, I kept thinking about the wonderful beauty and adventure of cycling. And I've mentioned before, last week, that one of my favorite books is called Outside Lies Magic. And it's all about Manzu, taking it slow for the purpose of taking in the scenery and experiencing a culture and a landscape. Thinking about my own bicycle adventures, I was, as I mentioned, a very intense bicycle enthusiast in Los Angeles. And then moving to Seattle, it took me a little while to regain that enthusiasm. My bicycle was a gift from Frank, one of our first Christmas presents from him. And it was a really wonderful bike, but kind of not exactly the best commuter bike. It was a little heavy, and the guys at work are huge cyclists. They would make fun of me. They called it the tank. So I basically rode it until it was pretty much falling apart, and then I kind of stopped riding for a while because it was started to rain, and I'm like a cat. I don't like riding in the rain. I'd rather take the bus. So it took a while for me to get back into it. The other reason I was not quite as enthusiastic about cycling in Seattle is that if you didn't know, it's kind of like San Francisco. There are a lot of hills, and we live on the top of the hill called Capitol Hill. And so even if it's not raining during the summer, it's still a heck of a time getting home. It's fun going to work because it's all downhill. It's about a 2.5 mile journey, and but coming home's another story. Thankfully, I was able to save up enough money and get myself a really nice bike. This is my new ride. It took me about a month to test drive all sorts of bikes, and there was literally one Saturday afternoon, a torturous hour and a half of contemplating within myself, fighting within myself. There were two models, and I just could not choose. And finally, I pulled the trigger and I bought this little beauty. She has 21 gears and gets me up the hill pretty good, especially on the granny gear, the lowest one. So even though it's still very arduous getting home, and I literally collapse on the floor and pass out for like 10 minutes, it's a wonderful adventure to, it's basically my gym. So it's still commuting. I get to get home and get to work a lot faster than waiting for the bus, and it's a little bit of exercise that I sorely need, especially as I get older. So bicycling in the Dow, I think it's so important to remember, it's really about the journey and it's about the experience. Kind of like learning to ride a bicycle. Once you get in touch with the Tao and begin to learn its lessons and to apply them in your life, the more you do it, the simpler it becomes, and the more you also just get to appreciate life and not really focus on staying on the bike. It's really just about the motion and dynamic balance. Literally dynamic balance, that is what keeps you going and rolling down the street. And I think something else that I really enjoy about bicycling in the Dow is that somebody had to pave the way for you. It's hard. It's really hard. I've tried a couple times to ride, off trail, as it were. And it takes a lot more effort because nature does not present a smooth surface for you, or rarely it does. And it's really a pleasure to live in a city where they're caring so much about the infrastructure. They're building bike lanes here in Seattle that are literally painted green, different signs for different infrastructure. And it's something that, the city has been clamoring for. And like the Dow, we have amazing opportunities to learn from others that have gone before us, that have looked at the path, literally the Dow, the way, and have brought us lessons as to how we can follow the path of least resistance, the one that is more aligned with nature and that will bring you positive results in your life without having to take you off in the wrong direction. Sometimes you do it anyway, you go off-road, and you realize how hard it is, and that maybe you can find your way back to the one and true path. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up here and give you my recipe for the week. Previously, I had mentioned that you should take a cabbage and steam it, but it's summer and you definitely don't want to do that. Works for winter, keeps you a little warmer, but in the summer, what you can do is just take a nice large head of Savoy or Chinese cabbage and freeze it until it's a solid block. And then when you're ready to use it, take it out of the freezer overnight and thaw it out. And then you can saute the rest of these ingredients. 1 carrot chopped or shredded, 1/3 of a cup of green olives, sliced, pimento stuffed is fine, a package of tofu or veggie ground beef, and a teaspoon each of cumin, paprika, cayenne, and curry powder. You saute that all in some olive oil until it's all fragrant. And then you can take those cabbage leaves, separate them from the thawed out cabbage, and just take some of that mix and stuff it in there. Use a toothpick to roll them and hold them closed if necessary. And if you put them in a baking dish, cover them with the sauce of your choice. I like just plain old tomato sauce. If you make your own, that's great. You can also take it out of the jar, that works fine too. And if you like, you can cover it with cheese, bake for about 20 to 30 minutes, and it's so delicious. You can have it cold or hot or for a picnic. Even put it in your bicycle bag on your pannier and take it for a picnic outside. So with that, I'm going to return it to Derek. Thank you, everyone. I hope you're having a great summer.